It's Lily Renn, and we're back with another math video. So today we're going to be reviewing radius, diameter, circumference, and pi. So let's start with a circle, as we're looking at right here. And this part right here is the center. So we're going to put a dot here, right about the center, and we're going to label this point O. It's ugly O, sorry. And we're going to draw a line right here from the center to the edge. This line right here we're going to call the radius. So let's write that out. For this example, we are going to be saying that the radius is equal to 5 centimeters. Okay, perfect. So we call this distance from the center to the edge the radius, or r, if we are simplifying it. Okay, so now we're going to look at another line that is going to take us straight from one edge through the center to the other edge. We're going to call this line the diameter, or d. We're going to write out diameter. Perfect. And if we're looking at the radius, we can see that this is from the middle to the edge. If we're going from the middle to the edge on both sides, it's clear to see that the radius twice is the diameter. Because here, let's write this out. This right here is one radius. And this right here is the same radius. Because it's just from the center point to the edge, it's going to be the same all around. So we can write out that because the diameter is twice the radius, we know that's equal to 2 times 5, which brings us to 10 centimeters. Okay, perfect. So we're going to draw another line, this time one that goes around the entirety of the circle. Excuse the messiness, but it's supposed to be around the perimeter of the circle. Okay, that's close enough. So we're going to call this line around the circle the circumference. Okay, excuse the messiness, but I think you can know it says circumference. And we don't know what the circumference is, so we're just going to put a question mark for now. So the circumference is basically the distance around the circle, which is basically kind of like the perimeter of the circle. So now that we know these three main parts, we are going to head down to here. Now we're going to talk about something really cool, which is pi, the number pi. No matter the size of the circle, if you divide the circumference by the diameter, you're always going to get the same number. And that number is about 3.14, which is about pi. So we're going to write that out for us. Pi is always going to be about 3.14, which is the first three numbers in pi. Normally it would go much longer, but this simplifies the equation for us. That's supposed to be a pi symbol. I apologize. And we also know here that pi equals circumference over diameter, we can also look at it in different ways. Like we can write out that circumference is equal to pi times our diameter. So perfect, now that we have that, we can also write this if we want to simplify it, which we'll most likely be doing in our future problems. We're going to write C for circumference is equal to pi d. And now we're not always going to know the diameter in a circle, and we figured out previously that the diameter is 2 times r, which is radius. So we can write this out. Circumference equals 2 times pi times r, which is the radius. And 2r is basically the same as d, so that's how we know this has to work, because the diameter is twice the radius. Okay, so now that we know this for sure, we can scroll down here, and we're looking at our first example problem right up here. So in this new circle, we can see that the radius is equal to 7 centimeters. This is what we're given. So if we wanted to find the circumference of the circle, we would write out the previous formula we just learned, which is C equals pi r, which is equal to 2 times 3.14 times 7. And we established that 3.14 is the simplified version of pi that we're going to be using in our equations. So this equation here is equal to, if we use a calculator, 43.96 centimeters. And since we used the estimation of pi, we wouldn't just write it as this. We would write the circumference is about 43.96 centimeters. And that right there would be the final answer. So we're going to go ahead and scroll right down here for one more example problem. This time we're given that the circumference is 31.4 centimeters. I forgot to write centimeters. Apologies, but this is supposed to be centimeters, as we know. Okay, and we can see that's labeled here. The dotted line is the circumference on the circle. So if we know that the circumference is 31.4, what would be the diameter? We can write this out by switching around the problem, taking it backwards a little bit. So D is equal to C over pi. Now we know this because C is equal to D times pi. It's basically just switching around the numbers a bit, but it's still, they're all in the same family, so it's still going to work out in the same way. We know here that the diameter has to be C over pi, which is equal to 31.4 because that's the circumference, over 3.14, which is what we're using as the approximation for pi. So if we do this division equation, we are going to get 10 centimeters This tells us that the diameter is 10 centimeters, which is from, again, here to here. Now, we reviewed before that half of the diameter is the radius. So if we cut this about in half, like there, we know that pi divided by 2, we know that 10 divided by 2 is 5. So this radius is 5, and this radius is 5. It's the same. So we can figure out all that just from knowing the circumference. So to sum it all up, we know that the radius goes from the center to the edge. Let's see. Radius goes from the center to the edge. The diameter goes across the whole circle. The circumference goes all the way around the circle. And pi helps us connect these all together using c equals pi d and c equals 2 pi r. This is Lily Renn, and thank you for listening to my presentation on radius, diameter, circumference, and pi.